Now I'm going to do examples with sine, cosine, and tangent. If you want an explanation of what sine, cosine, and tangent are, watch my previous video. But to recap, number one, sine, cosine, and tangent are operations. They're not numbers. These are operations. These are numbers. Number two, you can only use them for right triangles. Number three, you can only use them with acute angles, right? Not with right angles or obtuse angles. And number four, so katoa, sine of the angle equals the opposite side of the hypotenuse. Cosine of the angle equals the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. Tangent of the angle equals the opposite side over the adjacent side. Okay, so here's an example. Let's say we have a tree. There's a rope tied to the top of the tree down to the ground, and we know the angle between the rope and the ground is 20 degrees, and we know the rope is 12 feet long. We want to know the height of the tree, right? So first you have to understand, we basically have to use this angle because it's an acute angle. We cannot use this one because it's a right angle, right? We also have to use this side because that's what we're solving for. And finally, we're obviously going to use this side because this is the only side that's known. We can't use this side because we don't know what it is, right? So whenever you use sine, cosine, or tangent, you have to basically use three pieces of information. You need one angle and basically two sides, but one of those sides can be unknown. That's okay. So in this case, we need to determine, are we going to use sine, cosine, or tangent, right? So if you use this angle, what's the relationship of this side to that angle? Well, this side is opposite that angle, so that means we have to use either sine or tangent. That means cosine's out, because cosine doesn't use opposite sides. So this one's out, so it's either sine or tangent, right? So then we use this side as a tiebreak to determine are we going to use sine or tangent. So what's the relationship of this side to this angle? This is the hypotenuse. How do we know? Because it's opposite the right angle, right? Remember, the hypotenuse will never be the opposite or adjacent side, right? So the relationship of this side to this angle is the hypotenuse. This is the opposite side, this is the hypotenuse. Therefore, it's got to be what? Sine. If we use this angle and these two sides, we're going to use sine, not cosine, and not tangent, because those are the wrong sides with this angle, right? So we're going to use sine of 20 degrees equals opposite side, which is y, over hypotenuse, which we know is 12, right? So that's our basic equation. Sine of 20 degrees equals y over 12. We're solving for y, so we want to multiply the 12 over, so we basically get y equals 12 sine of 20 degrees, right? And you can punch that into the calculator, but be careful. Make sure you're in degree mode, not in radians or any other mode, otherwise you will get the wrong answer. So in this case, if you punch that in, you get 4.1 or 4.10, right? And in the problem, make sure you follow the directions and answer the question as they want it. So they might say round to the 10th place, which would be 4.1. They might say round to the 100th place, which might be, then in this case, 4.10. And then always label your answer in a word problem. Always put the units. In this case, it's going to be feet. In a different problem, it might be meters, yards, or miles, or whatever, right? Just make sure you label your answer as well, okay? So that's one example, but something interesting is actually, we didn't have to use this angle. We actually could have used this angle because this is also an acute angle, but again, we cannot use this one because it's a right angle. So what is this angle? Well, 180 minus 90 minus 20 is going to be 70. So we actually know that this angle is 70 degrees, right? So let's say you want to use this angle, not that one, for whatever reason, right? Okay, so then we have to look at what's the relationship of these same two sides to this angle, right? So now, this side is what? Is it the opposite or adjacent side or hypotenuse, right? Well, this is the adjacent side, because obviously it's not the opposite side. And this is not the hypotenuse, because this is the hypotenuse, right? So we're going to use the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So is that going to be sine, cosine, or tangent? So it's got to be cosine, right? So I'm going to do cosine of 70 degrees equals the adjacent side, which is y, over h is hypotenuse, which is 12, right? So now we have cosine of 70 degrees equals y over 12. Again, solve for y and multiply the 12 over. We get y equals 12 cosine of 70 degrees. And if you punch that into the calculator, you're going to get the same answer, 4.1, 4.10 feet. Okay? This example is a little harder, and you're going to see why in a second. So let's say we have this angle is 50 degrees, and we want to know the hypotenuse this time, and we're given this side here, right? So are we going to use sine, cosine, or tangent? So here, this is what kind of side compared to this angle? Well, this is the adjacent side to this angle because, again, this is the hypotenuse, right? So we're going to use the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So is that sine, cosine, or tangent? It's going to be cosine, right? So we have cosine 50 degrees equals the adjacent side, which is going to be 10, right? Over the hypotenuse, which is the unknown side, which is going to be h. So do you see how this is different from the previous example we just did? Because why? The variable's in the denominator now. So this is a little trickier, right? Easiest thing to do is just cross multiply, right? A lot of students try to multiply or divide the 10 over. That's not really going to help you because you're going to end up with 1 over h, right? That's not going to be h. So you really want to cross multiply. So 10 times 1 is 10. H times cosine of 50 is h cosine 50 of degrees, right? So here, you want to isolate the h. Now remember, cosine of 50 degrees is a number. Treat it like a number. You can divide over a number. No different than if this said 2h, you can divide the 2 over. Cosine of 50 is a number, you can divide it over, right? So when we divide that over, we get 10 divided by cosine of 50 degrees equals h. Again, basically just plug that into the calculator and make sure you round the answer correctly and that you're in the correct mode with degrees, right? So you should get about 15.6, depending on what you're going to round it, feet, whatever, right? So that's another example where the variable's in the denominator, not in the numerator. So this one's a little harder than the previous one, right? But again, what if we wanted to use this angle instead of this angle? Well, this angle is going to be what? 40 degrees, right? So again, we're trying to find this side, and again, we're going to use that side, right? But we're not going to use cosine anymore. Okay, why not? Because this side is opposite this angle, so we're not going to use adjacent anymore. So we just said opposite, so it's got to be sine or tangent. And then we have to use this side because that's what we want. So this is the hypotenuse, so it's got to be this one, not tangent. So we have to use sine here if we're going to use this angle. So we get sine of 40 degrees equals the opposite side, which is going to be 10 over the hypotenuse, which is going to be h. Again, notice how that h is in the denominator, right? So cross multiply. So 10 equals h sine 40 degrees. Divide the sine 40 over, you get 10 over sine of 40 degrees equals h, and you're going to get the same answer you did over here. It's going to be the same answer. It's going to be about 15.6 feet. You can do it either way, but just understand you can't use the right angle. It's got to be acute, okay? This is our final example. So let's say we have a tree 20 feet tall. Its shadow is x, we don't know, but we know the angle between, let's say, this rope and shadow is 55 degrees. So we got to use this angle and these two sides. Are we going to use sine, cosine, or tangent? What's the relationship of these two sides to this angle? Well, this side is opposite this angle, right? So it's got to be either sine or tangent, right? Not cosine. But what's the relationship of this side to this angle? Well, is this the adjacent side of the hypotenuse? Well, this is the adjacent side. How do we know? Because actually this is what? The hypotenuse. How do you know this is the hypotenuse? Because it's opposite the right angle. Remember, the hypotenuse can never be the opposite or adjacent side. So this is the adjacent side, this is the opposite side, so it's got to be which one? Tangent, right? Can't be sine, can't be cosine, because that uses the wrong sides with this angle. So we're going to use tangent. Tangent of what? Tangent of 55 degrees equals the opposite side, which is 20, over the adjacent side, which is x. So there's our equation. Again, be careful when the variable's in the denominator. Easiest thing to do is cross multiply. So you cross multiply, you get 20 equals x tangent 55 degrees. You're trying to solve for x. Remember, tangent 55 degrees is just a number. Treat it like a number, just divide it over. So you get 20 over tangent 55 degrees equals x. So you can punch that into the calculator. Again, make sure you're in degrees mode. Round correctly, label your answer, right? Okay, so what if you wanted to use this angle instead of that angle, right? So what is this angle, right? So 180 minus 90 minus 55, or basically 90 minus 55 should be 35, right? Because these two add up to 90. So we want to use this angle with these two sides now. So what's the relationship of these two sides to this angle? Well, this side is opposite this angle, so it's either sine or tangent. And this side here is the adjacent side to this angle, because I know this is the hypotenuse. So opposite over adjacent. So again, we're going to use tangent with this angle now, though, right? So tangent of 35 degrees equals the opposite side, which is x, over the adjacent side, which is going to be 20, right? So here, notice how the variable is actually in the numerator. So that's actually going to be easier for you, right? All you have to do is multiply the 20 over. So you get x equals 20 tangent of 35 degrees. Now you're going to get the same answer as you did over here, except what? This is actually a little easier, right? So that is actually why sometimes you don't want to use the angle they give you. You might want to use the other angle, because this is going to be a little easier than solving for this, right? You're less likely to make a mistake doing this than this, but you still get the same answer, right? So those are examples with sine, cosine, and tangent. If you want more understanding, look at my previous video. And if you were able to follow along, good job. If this was helpful, please like my video, subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.